From picking locks to finding dog, and I specifically said dog, not God. You'll see. As I've told many of you, I was raised in the Unitarian Church in Dallas, Texas, back in the old days before it became the Unitarian Universalist Church. One thing that always stood out to me about Unitarians and later UUs was the love and need for coffee. In our congregation, the duty to arrive and make copious amounts of coffee rotated week to week. My earliest memory of attending church was on such a morning when I was not quite 4 years old, and it was my parents' duty that morning to make the coffee. We arrived at the appointed hour, and the person who was supposed to meet us there with the key was not there. I recall standing with my mother in the cold while my father checked all the doors of the fellowship hall and the kitchen, and finding everything locked, my father grinned at me and said, "Here, I will teach you something." With a paper clip that he had found on the ground and the clip from a ballpoint pen that he had in his pocket, he proceeded to show me how to pick the lock and successfully open the door. We entered the fellowship hall, proceeded to the kitchen, and had coffee brewed and ready when the rest of the congregation began arriving. I tucked that piece of information away, and it is a skill I had used on many occasions throughout my life. I did not understand the concept of the Trinity, knew little of the concept of Jesus as God, and wasn't quite sure how to answer my friends when they asked if Unitarians were Christians. I knew of the teachings of Jesus, and that following his teachings was what he wanted us to do. I did not understand the worship of Jesus. I had children's books of Bible stories that I remember mostly because of the wonderful illustrations and the stories of love and compassion. Nowhere in that book was a mention of worshiping Jesus, just his words, that we were all children of his Father, and therefore brothers and sisters, who should love one another and treat each other as family. But in addition to the Bible, I recall being taught the words of Emerson and Thoreau, along with the poetry of Dickinson and Whitman. I was taught about harmony and balance and love of nature. In those, I found a sort of divine spirit, but not God as such. A funny to me now note is that the all-accepting Unitarian Church was a haven for mixed marriages between Christians and Jews. Most of my friends in Sunday school talked about celebrating both Christmas and Hanukkah, which I thought sounded very cool, because with Hanukkah you got 8 days. I was around enough of that I believed that everyone had one Christian parent and one Jewish parent. And although we did not celebrate Hanukkah in our home, and Christmas was celebrated as a family event rather than a religious holiday, for years as a child, I wondered which of my parents was Christian and which was Jewish. In my early teens, the Sunday school lessons became lessons in diversity and understanding. About once a month, they loaded all of us up and drove us to other churches to see how other people worshiped. I was fascinated by the many different ways to approach God that I was exposed to, but mainly to the idea that Christians seem to worship Jesus more than his teachings. And the things I began to be aware of in the world made me believe that many of these people seemed to believe that acknowledging Jesus was all they felt was important, and following his teachings was secondary, inconvenient, or even unnecessary. When I was a freshman in high school, my mother decided to remove me from public school and put me in private school. At that time, one of the options was Ursuline Academy, a Catholic girls' school. I had several friends who attended Ursuline, so that was my choice, the religious part being unimportant to me. I loved the challenge. I loved the camaraderie of an all-girls school. And I discovered a group of people who truly loved and lived the teachings of Jesus. It was not the words that compelled me, but the feeling of love that pervaded the community. I fell head over heels in love with that feeling, and for a while joined and participated in all the trappings of Catholicism. It was an amazing part of my journey, but that too was not enough. I eventually left the church, not in any official way, just sort of wandered away. I kept looking for that personal connection with God, which continued to elude me. I followed the path of life that I was led to believe we were all destined to: education, career, marriage, children. But still, there was a piece missing in the spiritual puzzle of my life. I read, I listened, I prayed, I questioned. I knew there was something more than following a prescribed set of rules or believing a particular dogma that would lead to an eternal life. I just didn't know what that was. There was a comedian who once said that he wanted to learn about all religions, pick and choose what he liked from each of them, and hope that God grades on a curve. I love that philosophy and realize that it truly fits how I believe. The more I travel and see the world and meet new people and learn new ideas, the more I realize that every place, every philosophy, every religion has something to offer on my spiritual journey. The final picture is still incomplete, but it's definitely coming into focus. Faith is defined as a belief in something one cannot see or verify. I knew that I had faith in God, whatever that may be, but the personal connection was still not there, until one day it was. As an artist and a prop designer, I was part of the theater community in Austin. I was also ranching in a small community outside of Austin, raising cattle, horses, chickens, and hay. My children were college age, but both were living at home with me at the time. We had 3 dogs, 2 male black labs, and 1 little white female lab mix. On a Saturday around noon, I went out to mow in a pasture, and as usual, my dogs came along to chase whatever I might scare up with my mower. Several hours later, I returned to the house to get ready for an evening working at my theater in Austin. My 2 black labs were waiting on the porch. My little white female was not with them, which was very unusual. I walked a few paths and called for her, but got no response. I finally had to leave for the theater and assured myself that she would be there when I returned. She was not. I went out with flashlights, calling and searching to no avail. My older son returned close to midnight and searched with me. I finally said we should sleep and continue our search at daylight. I awoke before daylight and began again. There was a large stock tank or pond at one end of the property, and as I approached that, I saw 2 large javelina sows, which are wild feral pigs, and about 10 babies with them. They can be quite ferocious when challenged, and my heart sank. I thought if my dog had approached them, she would have been no match for them. I searched a while longer and returned to the house to wait for my sons to join me. I sat down on the steps of my front porch and retraced my steps. I had covered all the trails, circled all the pastures, been up and down the road in front of my property, and had found nothing. I was clueless what to do next. But in that moment of complete and utter desperation, I reached out to the universe and simply said, help. And immediately it responded. I knew I had to walk to the road and walked to the end of the property line. There was not even a question which way to go. I knew. Even though I had been up and down the road several times, I knew this was what I had to do. So off I went, reaching the road, turning left, heading to the property line, knowing I would find her. The further I walked, the less sure I felt. I should have seen her by now. I got about 10 meters from the property line and started to turn around and go back when I felt like I'd been hit with a 2x4 on the back of my head, and the thought returned very clearly that I must walk all the way to the property line. I took about 2 more steps and heard something. I scrambled up a thorny, vine-covered incline, climbed through a barbed wire fence, and saw something white, my dog. At first I thought she was dead, but then I saw her little body move a bit. I climbed through more vines and finally reached her, only to discover that she had her head stuck in a hole at the base of a tree. She had obviously chased something into that tight hole, then was unable to pull her head back out. She had been there for about 18 hours. I struggled to pull her out, but could not. With my cell phone, I called my son and said to bring shovels and whatever other tools he might think of to free her. But then a calm came over me, and it dawned on me how to get her out. I grabbed her by the skin on her back and stretched the skin out as tightly as I could and pulled her free. I called my son to say she was out, and he asked how she was. I said, "She looks embarrassed." Her neck was raw from struggling to free herself, and her first few steps were shaky from being cramped in that position for so long, but she was alive and very happy to see me. I realized I had walked within 5 to 10 meters of her several times, and she had heard me calling, but was unable to make me hear her or be seen due to the viney growth all around her. I sat on the ground with her in my lap for a while and just cried. My tears were tears of joy and gratitude, and the awesome realization that in what seemed to be my darkest moment, I had reached out to God, and God had answered. When I had a moment of faltering faith, God had smacked me up the back of the head and said, "Pay attention," and I did. For some, a God experience is a flash of insight or a profound peace. For me, it was the 2x4 up the back of my head, but I learned the lesson that God was trying to teach me. The takeaway from this experience is that I have learned to look at every situation with a fresh perspective. Life is supposed to be joyous. Fear not was how Jesus expressed it. So now I assess whatever situation I'm in, and if any particular moment is not joyous, I know that there is a lesson I'm supposed to be learning. Some of those lessons are hard, but I know that once the lesson is learned, the joy will return. I listen, I pay attention, and I know that there is order and balance in the universe, and the universe will tell me what path to follow. I wake up every morning and pray, "This is what my plans are for the day," unless you have other plans. I tell everyone that I have good angels, and I do. Faith is believing in something you cannot see or verify. I do not have faith anymore. I have verification and assurance. Once you have had that God experience, there is nothing, no person, no experience, no anything that can take that knowledge of God from you. And I will leave you with the version of the Unitarian covenant that I remember reciting every Sunday of my youth. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve mankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall dwell in harmony with the divine. Thank you.